What's up, everybody? Tara Wellman here. I know it has been a while, and I know this seems like a weird time for a series preview. Well, it's not exactly a series preview, but the Cardinals, as everyone else did, wrapped up the unofficial first half of the season with the first win of the Mike Shildt era in St. Louis Cardinals history, as yes, the St. Louis Cardinals dismissed Mike Matheny, Bill Miller, and John Mabry before the All-Star break. So there's plenty to talk about there, but we'll get to that. Today, though, I'm very excited to welcome in someone who can talk with me more generically about the crazy things that have happened in baseball's first half. We'll talk a little bit about the All-Star game. We'll talk a little bit about some weird baseball pet peeves, and who knows what other general awesomeness we will get into today. I'm very excited to have with me right here for Birdseeds at Birds on the Black, Jessica Kleinschmidt from MLB's Cut 4. Well, Jessica, I'm very excited to chat with you as we head into this All-Star week. So first of all, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So obviously there's a lot going on with Cardinals baseball right now, which was not what I expected to be saying going into the All-Star break. We'll get to a lot of other stuff as we go along here. But first of all, Cardinals fans all want to start there. What is the reaction from your perspective of this team that going into the All-Star break just dismissed their manager and their hitting coach and assistant hitting coach?
I'm not that shocked. At first I was. I think once the shock wore off, you kind of realized this kind of makes sense. And if you look at what Mike Matheny says, somewhat taking the high road, and I know Cardinals fans are somewhat relieved from what I've seen, but I think anytime you fire a manager, fans are going to kind of stop after they're either going to be happy about it or upset, or they're just going to say, okay, what's the next step? And I always like when the interim manager steps up to the plate, no pun intended. Obviously, I've been following the Reds a lot. I'm obsessed with Joey Votto. So I've liked when an interim manager can prove himself when you're dealt these cards. And it's been a really struggling season for the Cardinals, as you know. You mentioned there hasn't been a lot to talk about. And all of a sudden, boom, this happens. And then, Fowler hits a home run today. And that was kind of funny to hear about as well. But from an outsider perspective, I wasn't too shocked once I saw the announcement and it happened. From what I've seen from Cardinals fans, I think it was somewhat of a long time coming. And like I said, when it comes to firing a manager plus hitting and whatever type of coaches, these are to fire a few as opposed to an entire team. But I'm hoping it works out. I think that Cardinals fans are the most passionate fans in baseball, period, whether it's a negative or a positive reaction. I think that is super important in baseball. So as long as they're happy with it in the long run, I think they'll be okay. But I think a fresh start coming back from the All-Star break is exactly what they needed.
It's such a weird thing when you mentioned the Reds in a very similar situation this year, obviously Riggleman taking over as the interim manager there. I always feel like it's such a strange situation to be in for that guy, because I would say almost always it's not just the manager that's the problem. A lot of times there are roster issues or guys that are underperforming or, whatever the other circumstances may be. So all of a sudden you're the guy who's now supposed to fix all of that when you don't really have the greatest product to work with anyway. So I do think it's an interesting challenge. Mike Shildt, who was the bench coach, is the interim manager now for the Cardinals. And from everything that I've ever heard anyone say about him, he's got this brilliant baseball mind, which I think is kind of funny because that's not what anyone ever said about Mike Matheny.
Right.
They talked about his people skills or his leadership ability, but not his
which
his
is
baseball
fine
IQ.
to a certain extent. You can be great with the media, but sometimes people don't really care about that. Like Aaron Boone's great with the media, and that was the only thing that I was worried about heading into the season. Like, cool, he can handle the media, but is he going to be a good coach? And he's obviously, I like his age, I liked everything like that. So maybe they do need one of those brilliant baseball minds who may not be such a people person, or I don't know, his personality that well, but you never really know. So if you have something different, obviously what was happening wasn't working. So this could be what they need to be like, boom. I love second halves because there's always those few guys, and then obviously the teams that kind of make it different. Kyle Seager last year had an amazing second half. You're kind of sitting there like, where the hell this guy come from? And I love that. So maybe it'll happen with the Cardinals, because I can't tell you, I really want something good to happen. They may, obviously the World Series may not happen, but I really feel bad for fans, and I just hope something good comes out of it.
It's a really interesting time, too, because when you look at the start to the second half for the Cardinals, they play 8 of the first 11 games of the second half are against the Chicago Cubs, who just recently took over the division lead. The Brewers are scuffling. They've got a lot of injured players right now. So as problematic as the first half has been for the Cardinals, baseball-wise, the division is still up for grabs, I think. None of those teams have really stepped up to claim it. So, and then when you have 8 games right off the top of the second half against the team that you're trying to catch, I mean, if there's ever a time to take advantage of some of those changes that have made, it seems like there's a golden opportunity there. Cardinals have been really good at not taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah.
But it's there if things start clicking.
Well, it's an interesting division, like you said. Like obviously heading into this season, the Yankees were certainly the team that everybody was talking about. Once JD Martinez went to the Red Sox, that was a team as well, and the Houston Astros. But then the Cubs are always the team in discussion. No matter how stacked the rest of the teams are, the Cardinals are never out of the discussion. Even you mentioned the Brewers too. The Brewers got, one day they got Yelich, and then of course Kane, and Miami was a distant relative or a distant memory when it came to Yelich, and that was great to watch. So that's the thing I like about the Cardinals. They're never not in the conversation, and that's what's interesting, because you could talk about every single team, and you're going to leave out the Marlins. You're going to leave out certain, like the Padres. You never leave out the Cardinals. So it's always kind of interesting, because you're listing these teams, you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to mention the Cardinals. How can I not mention the Cardinals? So it's always interesting in that dynamic. So they may not be, like I said, the team that's going to make something interesting out of the postseason, but they're going to make it interesting for other teams. Like that one season where the Braves or the Reds, they won like 20 billion games in a row towards the end of the season. They were going to make the postseason, but they were going to piss off a lot of people on the way to the postseason. So they were like, well, you know what? We're not going to make it, but I'm going to make this some dramatic stuff. I feel like that's going to happen with them towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm very curious now. I was a little worried because they'd gotten pretty boring.
Yeah.
Really, starting last season, it really just carried over into this season. They brought in some guys like Dexter Fowler, like Marcell Ozuna, trying to change it up, and it just wasn't working. So they got pretty monotonous, just in general, to watch. So at least at this point, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens and who kind of steps up, who snaps out of these dramatically long slumps they've been in. And so if nothing else, I think that their role in the division, like you said, just got a little bit more interesting. And then, of course, there's going to be lots of conversation about who the manager will be and who it should be and who might be available at the end of the year. And Joe Girardi's a name that a lot of people are throwing around. I don't know that he's that different than Mike Matheny, so I'm not sure that's really the right direction to go. But man, there are going to be some interesting conversations to be had, that's for sure. You mentioned the Reds, and I want to bring up Joey Votto, because I have to tell you, as a lifelong Cardinals fan, I've not been the biggest Joey Votto fan, which I think is fair and reasonable, because that's just part of being a fan. But I have to ask, tell me why I should be a Joey Votto fan.
So, no, it's a great question, because I've always liked him. I was a fantasy analyst for years. I loved him as a baseball player. And when you're a fantasy analyst, you forget that these guys are humans, which is why I kind of got out of that industry, because I really didn't like the person I was becoming. And so when I got hired by Cut 4, I was noticing every week we were writing about Joey Votto. I knew he was a weird dude, like a different, unique type of dude. But I wanted to do more in-depth stuff. So I did some research on him, and I realized this guy not only speaks what's on his mind, but he's so intelligent and so, outgoing, and also talks about, he's also intelligent when it comes to the sport too. And it's so difficult to find that balance. And I've interviewed tons of players, and he's just different. You can talk to him about the game and you'll stop and listen to him. And there's this one clip that I wrote about last year, or I think it was over spring training. when he was talking to LB Network, and he was talking about how to hit, just basically how to hit. And he wasn't just speaking to baseball players. He mentioned, he's like, I'm also talking to young softball players, young women, young girls, young men trying to make it as a baseball player or softball player. And you just sat there and listened to him. And I played growing up. I was an awful coachable kid. I just never listened to my coaches. I just did my own thing, which is probably why I'm not playing in Major League Baseball right now, because I didn't listen to my coaches. But it was just kind of that dynamic. And when he was talking, you just listen to him. But you also hear him talking about his day or his dog or just people on the team. And you listen to that too. So he gives you tons of Cut 4 content, but he's also so intelligent about baseball as well. So you can't really do that. And he loves to mess with people. But I think that's what's kind of important. He kind of brings, the old school baseball mentality, but also the new fans that are being introduced to the sport, the millennials, if you will, and making it fun. And you see him, messing with the Phillies fans, and people get so pissed off about that, but that's part of it, right? So that's why I think everybody should love a Joey Votto type of person, because he's a veteran, he's good at baseball, but he's also quirky and unique, and I've never come across any other athlete like him.
He's the kind of player and the kind of person that I feel like if I didn't have the baseball rivalry in mind, I would be all about it. But there's just been that, because he plays in the same division as the team that I grew up watching, and so there's been a little bit of that. But I do think it's fascinating the way that so many people in baseball sort of gravitate to him because of all of that, and because he's personable enough that you don't have to root for his team to be interested in what Joey Votto is doing. Which, as you mentioned, is great for Cut 4 content.
Exactly, yeah.
That's one of the things that I think is so much fun about the work that you do with Cut 4, is that there are so many little moments in baseball that kind of break up sometimes the monotony or the tension of the analysis that sort of sucks you in, which is a wonderful part of the game in and of itself. But sometimes those little moments, you mentioned Suarez today, there was a foul ball that bounced in the camera well, just to the right of the visitor's dugout. He caught it on the bounce and then ran back into play and was trying to play it off like he caught the foul ball. It was pretty funny. But there are little moments like that. There are also things that get fans pretty riled up. One of them being bat flips. And this is something that I love talking about because I love bat flips. But let me tell you, the Cardinals have a reputation of being a little boring for a reason. Not a lot of Cardinals fans love the theatrics that tend to come with bat flips. So I feel like I'm often in the minority. This has become a hot topic again. It always seems to every month or so. Somebody will bat flip in evidently the wrong scenario or against the wrong guy or in the... It feels to me like this is a lot of complaining about one of the things that's the most fun about baseball.
Yeah, and the Cardinals fan base is a very old school fan base, so I totally understand where they're coming from. But the bat flip was brought up just last night. Mark Canha, who I can't tell you, he's not the guy that's ever on Cut 4. He's not the guy to be doing the weird stuff. He's a foodie. He loves to eat and he loves to just go play baseball. He's a quiet guy. And to have him come out and say, I'm not sorry that I did a bat flip. Of course, they did it against the Giants, which is the Bay Area series, Battle of the Bays, all of that. And that's not a huge, a nasty rivalry, but, Oakland's very fun when it comes to the social media stuff. So you see all of it. And so to do it against the Giants, I think was a little bit, that's another kind of old school type of, mentality when it comes to the fans. So I think that kind of added up, but I love that he was outspoken about that. I do love the bat flip. And I told you this coming into this, the only thing that I feel bad about is the pitchers. And like I said, it's no different from, okay, they hit a home run off of you and now they're going to bat flip, and that I could see where the pitcher might have that's really annoying, because from a player's perspective, the only time I've ever heard them complaining about it is the pitcher or maybe a manager every now and then, because they're used to the old school baseball mentality. But I could see that it's like a rubbing in your face type of thing. But I love it. I think it's super important for baseball. People are always complaining that baseball isn't fun, which I totally disagree. And I think that's Cut 4's main objective, is to show you baseball's fun. We are highlighting fun. If you don't think it is, that's fine. But it's just, whatever. And so with that dynamic, I think it's important to bring the theatrics into it. Sometimes it's a little much, but I grew up an athlete. I know what it's like to have adrenaline and not really think when you're doing something, when you just scored a touchdown, just scored a play, just, crossed home. So I totally understand it. But at the same time, I don't know if we'll ever find a balance. But if you notice, like, bat flips weren't great at the very beginning of this season, and I wasn't really sure why. Last year, the World Series, there was bat flips. There was so much theatrics. There was, I remember Game 5 changed my life. I think it took off years of my life. I was upset I wasn't a smoker because I needed a cigarette. It was just the craziest game of my life. And to see all that happening, and for people to deny that energy because of a bat flip, I didn't understand that. So I don't respect people who like to bash on the bat flip, but I do respect people who have a weirdness about it to a certain extent, because it's a very non-progressive sport in certain ways. So I get that, but it's also going to be happening and changing. So buckle up, buddies and girlies, because it's happening.
I just always think it's such a strange, and I get it. I think the premise behind not liking the bat flip is not wanting to show up the pitcher, and I get that. I think there's a weird dynamic there that should be respected. But I also think this whole idea that bat flipping is disrespecting the game itself, kind of just it's so far removed to me from the fact that it's a game and it's baseball and it's supposed to be fun, and the fans in the stands are jumping up and going crazy. So, the players are feeling those same emotions and reacting in the moment is something that I don't think should be, frowned upon as far as.
And it happens in other sports all the time.
Right.
Like baseball, you have a chance to kind of, slow down and think about it. But football and basketball, it's so quick. These guys are doing crazy things, but it's okay when they do it. If a baseball player does it, it's like, you're disrespecting America's favorite pastime. And it's like, all right, guys, let them be. Just let them be. So other sports, they do it, and it's okay. Obviously, NFL, when they're celebrating, they're getting fined now, which I think is stupid. That's an awesome part of the game. But, whatever. It's fine, I guess.
Everybody's got an opinion. Everyone certainly has that. You mentioned the A's. Obviously, you are an A's fan. Cardinals fans have paid a lot more attention to the A's this year because of Stephen Piscotty. And as far as the first half goes, I feel like that has to be one of the most just incredible personal stories that I remember in recent history, as far as following a particular player through a specific thing, and the way that he responded, and the way the team responded, and the way that the former fan base responded. And what has that been like, following the Piscotty family and just the unimaginable story that they've been living through this year?
Well, to know that baseball has a heart is great, and to know that the A's reached out. The Cardinals worked together too. People forgot that the Cardinals were a part of this deal as well. They wanted to send Piscotty to be near his mother, who was passing away. And not only was it great for the A's fan base, who loves Steven as a player, and to get a guy like that was great for the A's to kind of be like, cool, not only are we getting a good human being, but he gets to be reunited with his mom, but he's a hell of a player too. And that was the best deal you could ever imagine. And like I said, the Cardinals were a part of that as well. And we're seeing a tweet about that saying, that was good, but remember, the Cardinals were a part of this as well. And to add on top of it, Piscotty comes back after his mom passes away and hits a home run. And they're playing the Astros, and you look over at Bregman, who he shows emotion, but more of the bat flip type of personality. But you look over at him, and he was golf clapping. He was like, this is badass. And they just enveloped, welcomed him with open arms. And they're such a great family. And it just reminds you that it's more than baseball. And that was great as well. And then obviously the A's are having a fantastic season. They're so much fun to watch. And nobody ever takes the A's seriously when the team does do well. I love the reactions they get, because nobody's ever expecting it. The A's are never a bad team. They're never a bad team. It's always just finding ways for them to, work together. And their AL West has been a really low-key tough division, and except for this year because they hosted 2 of the no-hitters right off the bat, and so that's been great. But it's such a beautiful story and reminds you that it's more than just winning and losing. They're all humans and they all have families that they love and care about. And when you go out in the field and you hit a home run and you don't get goosebumps in those moments, then you need to be a human. You don't have a heart.
Yeah, those are the moments where I think it doesn't matter what team you root for. You realize like these guys. There's something about being a fan of the sport and of the players and the athletes that sort of transcends all of those rivalries, at least for a minute, until you sort of come back down to earth a little bit, and then everybody can do their thing. But to me, that was one of the most amazing things to watch, just from so many different angles of that story, and obviously just completely heartbreaking. But to see the way people rallied around them was pretty cool. So we are at the All-Star break, which seems like it was never going to get here this year, but All-Star break, All-Star game is here. The festivities this week have already started. The Futures game was happening sometime today, and that'll be played. And then we'll have the Home Run Derby, and then, of course, the All-Star game itself. First of all, are you a fan of the All-Star week festivities? Some people are a little weird about not really caring about the All-Star game.
So I like the All-Star game, but I love the Home Run Derby. And I think the reason why is because, especially this year, there's a whole different roster of people. I love that. Old faces and new faces, but I love when the new faces come because there's always that one guy, like Max Muncy's going to come out there and hit like 7,000 home runs. And there's always going to be like the guy like, I told you so. Like, no, you didn't. Nobody called that. Like, stop. So that's my favorite part because, like I said, like Josh Hamilton a decade ago when he hit, like, I think 7,462 home runs in that one round. Yeah. Like, that stuff happens, and I love it. And there's always a guy who just makes it interesting. So I love that because the casual fan may not love the All-Star game because if you really don't know baseball and you're at Nationals Park, you're like, I don't know who any of these guys are. You're watching the Home Run Derby and they're just like, oh, look at all these home runs being hit. Who doesn't love home runs? Like, that's awesome. They get to pick, who they want to pitch to. There's always a cute little story behind that. If it's like a dad or like their BFF coach or, their cousin twice removed who just is in town for the week. It's like, hey, I'll throw it to you. Sure. There's always a cool story from that aspect. Or like last year with Charlie Blackmon, we was like hanging out with the girl that brought him Gatorade and they had a cute little conversation. Like, you get the best of both worlds in the Home Run Derby. All-Star game's great. I get nervous because it's played right in the middle of the season, and I worry the guys are going to get injured. And voting is stressing me out because it's hard to find a balance between numbers and fan voting. And I get it, you have to be a favorite, but like, don't be voting my cousin who's playing in single A like that. Don't write him in. That doesn't make any sense. Like, don't do that. But I think that's why I like the Home Run Derby because you get the best of both worlds in regards to the competitive aspect, but the fun cut four stuff as well.
I always feel like with the Home Run Derby, I don't know, there's something about it where so many years I'm like, all right, I'll watch the Home Run Derby. And then, the first couple guys in the first round, I'm like, well, that was kind of boring when they only hit 4 or 5 home runs. And then there's that one guy or that one person in each round that just is mind-boggling with what they're able to do. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Turn and pose for the camera first and then go back to, yeah. Right. And then whoever it is, like, dabbing them off with a towel, and you're like, okay. But I always get sucked in every year, even when I'm like, I'm not really sure I care about any of these hitters this year. And then there's somebody
the World Series of Poker or like the X Games, like a random curling event. You're like, this is dumb, but the next thing you know, you're like,
and then you're really into it. Come on, hit one more.
Placing bets, like live tweeting it. Like, yeah, I get it. It happens. Yeah.
But I think the All-Star game, I feel very similarly. I've never been a huge fan of sort of the weird disconnect between wanting to see the best players in the game and the obvious popularity contest that fan voting becomes. I think one or the other is fine. If you want it to be a fan exhibition where everybody just gets to see their favorite player on the field, I guess that's fine. I think it sort of is a weird way to then play an actual game
Yeah.
where you're not really seeing the best guys in the sport. It tends to be managed in a way that's really just to get everybody in the game, and that's fine if you're a
Which is
fan
very
of,
little league. It's very little
right.
league where, that you have to get your minimum amount of things. And
Yeah. It's just a very weird, not baseball game.
yeah, there isn't a lot of competition, which I
Right.
think is good because if you get too competitive, that's where injuries happen.
Yeah.
But I also, like, from a geeky perspective, where it's nice to only, honestly, from a journalistic perspective, to only cover one game is like hashtag blessed.
Right.
Like, as opposed to like all 70 that are going on, you're like, I can't. And just one, you're just like, okay, but at the same time, it's their All-Star game. I was surprised at how much there wasn't a lot to talk about, because it's mainly like the fans that have fun with it, or the commentators. I love the broadcasters have so much fun with it because they're having fun too. So low key, the broadcasters are probably one of the MVPs of the All-Star game.
It is fun because it's so totally different, and
Yeah.
and nobody's really, you don't have to get like really deep into the analysis of the game because there's nothing to analyze. No one's gonna run out. No one's gonna run out a weak grounder. You're not trying to pick up double-digit strikeouts.
You went 0 for 2?
Right.
Really? Wow. Drop him from your fantasy team. Like, it's fine.
Yeah. So, from that perspective, you're right. They do have to come up with, other things to make it interesting. And I think that's a really fascinating process to watch, as far as what they do to try to make it for the fans, as opposed to about the game. I do, though, one thing that I do really enjoy is seeing first-time All-Stars. Because similar to watching Major League debuts, I don't care who it's for, I love watching that. So first-time All-Stars are really fun because you feel like, regardless of, what the result of that day is, this is a sort of a badge of honor so many of these guys have been working for, and there are a lot of
take advantage. They let the moment soak in.
Yeah,
as opposed to the guy who's like, this is his 7th All-Star game, and he's like, this is cool,
right. And it's cool to see their reactions to things.
Right.
There are a lot of first-time All-Stars this year, when I was looking at what the final rosters were, which is going to be cool. I know Cardinals fans were surprised when Miles Mikolas was an All-Star for them this season. Then Yadier Molina was named to the team to replace Buster Posey, which I think is a really interesting dynamic because Yadier Molina is one of those guys that's been there 9 million times, and then going with Miles Mikolas, who probably didn't start this year thinking that he had a chance at being an all-star. So those are the kinds of stories that I do find really compelling, and it's really fun to watch them when their names are announced, and there's always somebody that just has this priceless reaction, and then it's great. Then the game is irrelevant.
Yeah, because the new All-Stars, they remember when they made 11, 12-year-old All-Stars in Little League, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting next to Bryce Harper and we're about to share a milkshake. Like, just weird things like that. And I think it's important for them to have that, but then once it wears off, I don't think it's bad, but it's nice to know that they did have that one moment where they're like, this is pretty awesome.
And to that point, I mean, a lot of these guys may have never really imagined themselves standing on the same field as potentially future Hall of Famers, right? Guys that they watched when they were coming up through baseball, and, maybe it was the guy that they would mimic in the backyard when they were playing with their friends or whatever, and now they're standing on the same team with them at the All-Star game. So those are the kinds of things that I think are really cool, even if I think a lot of it gets a little gimmicky.
Yeah.
But, I guess that's part of putting on the show.
Exactly.
All right, so we've kind of been a little all over the place, but was there anything about the first half, whether it's Cut 4 stuff that you guys had the chance to cover, or just weird baseball stuff, that stands out to you as far as great moments from the first half this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Cut 4 specifically, I've been trying to highlight a lot of women in the industry, and I'm trying to put forth that a little bit more. One of the first stories I did was about Emma Tiedemann, and she's the play-by-play announcer for the Lexington Legends. And she just randomly popped up on my timeline, and people were congratulating her on this job. And maybe 2 minutes later, I messaged her, and I called her, and I wrote up this story about her. And she was just so cool and so just badass. And then when my show debuted, we were going to originally do it on a specific player. And in my first show that I wanted to do, I wasn't obsessed with the original script that we had written. And then my colleague, who's also a producer for the show, said, why don't we write about Jenny Cavnar? Because I wrote about Jenny, and she, of course, is the play-by-play analyst or what did the first play-by-play telecast in 25 years for the Rockies. And I wrote about her, and I got a few quotes, and it was supposed to be this small little announcement. And I happened to get Thomas Harding involved, and then Thomas talked to Jenny. Jenny's really close to Dallas Braden, so I talked to Dallas about her, and it turned into this big thing, and it was one of my most read pieces. And Gemma, my colleague, said, why don't we make it Jenny for the first episode of Infinite Jess? And it wasn't even going to be a big thing. I was going to interview a couple of her colleagues until Jenny said, I would love to be on your show. And I was like, what? And so it turned into this whole thing, and I don't get like nervous around anyone. And I've, been around some pretty cool people, but to have Jenny's phone number in my phone and get an interview, it was supposed to be an 8-minute interview and ended up being 20 minutes. And I was so glad I got to talk about her. And not only just as like somebody I can look up to in the industry, she's just so warm and so kind and sweet. And I tend to just be kind of an asshole, and she was just great. And just to know that, like, okay, like she reminds me to just take in the moments and be sweet and be nice. And that alone was great. So all the women in sports stuff that I've gotten to do has just reminded me why I do it. I have a really cool job, but to know that, I get DMs from young women saying, should I join the sports media world? And at first I'm like, no, it's really bad. Like, because they'll see my mentions and they're like, I don't know how you do it. But then I'll talk to them, and that kind of reminds me, I've spoken to classes about it. So as long as I'm able to, take off some of the pressure and remind them, like, it's not easy. But sports media may not be for everyone. And I also tell them that too. Just make sure you're doing what you want to do, not just because you think X, Y, and Z has a cute little Twitter profile and you want to do what she's doing. And I tell them every day, like, if you want to, you don't be the next Katie Nolan. Don't be the next Sarah Spain. Sarah Spain and Katie Nolan are two of the best women in the industry, but they're doing a great job being themselves. Be the first Mary Lou Freebush or whoever, or be the first Jessica Kleinschmidt. Just don't do that. So that to me was a huge personal goal, but to know that I got to do that right out of the gate this season was super important to me. And to know that Cut 4 was not only happy to edit my stuff, they encouraged me and supported me. They said this was a great story, and yes, we should absolutely do it. And that's the thing I love about working for MLB is they're so pro women, and anytime I've had an issue, they've handled it, and it's been great. So that's probably been the main thing that I've absolutely loved this season.
Well, obviously, I am personally invested in that story as well. So I was very excited to see that when your show came out, and I think Jenny's amazing, and I to have someone like that sort of as a champion for girls, looking up to anyone in this industry, I think is really great. So
Emma and Jenny met too. They met at a Reds game. And so obviously they were in front of Joey Votto. He didn't really see it, but it was just like, this is better than any birthday present I could have ever had. Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do want to get to one other thing because we had one other Twitter sort of question, not really question, more like topic suggestion from a buddy of mine who happens to be the radio voice for the single A affiliate of the St. Louis Cardinals. Nathan Believa is a friend of mine, and he very well knows my opinion on ballpark proposals. So he wanted to throw that out there. Yeah, I know. How much time we got? So let me just start with this. I think what he wanted me to get to is what he probably just wants me to put out there publicly, and that is that I have said repeatedly, if I were dating someone who proposed to me at a ballpark, I would straight up tell them no. And he thinks that's hilarious. I don't know why. I don't think he believes me, but 100% straight up no.
So I agree. And the reason why I dislike them so much is because it interrupts the game. And it's a public proposal, which I've never been proposed to except for every other day on Twitter, which doesn't count. But when it in public, that's too much pressure for the girl. Or if you want to be the woman to ask him, that's fine too. Pro that, but don't do it at a ballpark. I just feel like it's cheesy. I feel like you're making it about yourself, which, yes, you want to spend the rest of your life with this person. That's all well and good. But you're interrupting my chance to enjoy the love of my life. And here you are, just trying to interrupt this. And I have so many people now that it's well known that I hate the ballpark proposal in between a game. Like Carlos Correa did it after a game with the World Series type of ring of his own before he even got one. And, the way that Kanye did it with Kim, that's fine too. Nobody was at the field. There was nobody there, and you're not interrupting anything. That's what drives me nuts. And it doesn't get me as mad as people running onto the field. That definitely interrupts play. But I think it's stupid, and I think it's, that sounds really bad, because people are always like, oh, is it because you're single and, like, upset? Like, no, that's not what it is. I think it's cheesy. And same thing, if I were dating somebody, he'll probably do that to me just because I'm the type of person where they would, like, control me in that aspect. I would say no as well, like, no, honey, you was doing this again, and it's not going to be here. Nice try, though. Yeah. So that's my thing, and I don't know if it's just happening more or if people are sending them more to you, but I notice it's happening so much more frequently, and it drives me nuts. And there's always somebody's like, why you got to bash on people? Because I don't like them. I don't, I don't like hot dogs on mustard, but am I going to not talk to my friend because she or he put mustard on their hot dog? No, we all have our opinions. I don't like them. I think they're annoying, and it's a travesty, and it's a waste of time, and it interrupts the game, and that's all I have to say about that.
Yes. I echo all of that. And I think that, every time I say something about it, again, there are people who get real worked up about me not liking ballpark proposals. Yeah. And look, you know what? If you know that that's the kind of thing that the person you're dating is going to be all about, then, I guess, like, do you, but I'm still not going to like it.
Yeah. I hosted a bridal shower, and he proposed to his girlfriend at an A's game, but, like, good luck to them.
Yeah. So I just found out today on the Cardinals broadcast that new interim manager, Mike Schilt, his dad proposed to his mom at a game, and I was like, well, there's the first thing I don't like about him.
There it goes.
There wasn't anything. There was nothing until then, and now there's the one thing on the list. And then I had to clarify that was intended as a joke because people get really angry on the internet, and we don't need any of that. All right. Well, I wanted to make sure that we got to that because I knew I would hear about it later if we didn't bring it up. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. And there's baseball to be watched and stories to be told. So I will let you get back to it. But I appreciate you joining me today.
First, thank you so much for having me, Terry. I appreciate it.
Now, like I said, for the Cardinals, big changes, and there will be plenty of commentary from me, from everyone else over at Birds on the Black, and just about every other corner of Cardinals Nation in the coming days and weeks. But for now, take a break. Everyone take a breath. Let's all sort of reset, enjoy the festivities of the All-Star Week, if that's your thing, and if not, just kind of, do a little bit of a reset and get ready for the second half, because it sounds like if you're a Cardinals fan, it will be at least interesting from here on out. And for those of you who are just baseball fans of another team or in general, plenty to look forward to in hopefully an exciting second half of baseball. Again, huge thank you to Jessica for joining me today. I had so much fun, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We'll maybe have her again on sometime. For Birds on the Black, I'm Tara Wellman. I'll see you next time.